So, Simon's Quest was a bit of a misstep for Konami. While it still received generally okay reception, it wasn't near the praise the first game got. While we don't have any concrete sales figures of Simon's Quest, it's also said it didn't sell as well as Castlevania 1. Still, it must have been good enough for Konami to greenlight a sequel, as on December 22, 1989, Castlevania III, Dracula's Curse, would be released in Japan for the Famicom, with it coming over to the States on September 19, 1990. This game would end up being the final one Hitoshi Akamatsu, the original creator of Castlevania, would have his hand in. Afterwards, he would be demoted by Konami because both this game and Simon's Quest didn't sell as well as the first game. Damn, I guess Konami really started all those bad business practices we know them for way back in the day. Because of this demotion, Akamatsu eventually left the company, and besides helping program a few other games, this would be the last we hear from him. What's really tragic is that using lack of sales as a reason to demote Akamatsu was a pretty poor reason. Castlevania III sold around 850,000 units worldwide. Like, yeah, sure, it wasn't the first game, which sold over 1 million units. That's still a bullshit reason to demote somebody, no? It certainly wouldn't be the last time Konami would try and screw over their workers, but there's no reason to bring up that whole saga with Kojima. Let's just get into the game proper. One other thing I'd like to bring up before we truly get started. I'm going to be making some comparisons between the game we got in America and the Japanese version of this game. Why do that when I hadn't done it for the first 2 games in the series? Compared to the American version, the Japanese version has quite a few differences that I feel are important enough to mention. You'll be seeing gameplay from both versions throughout the video as well. One somewhat minor one, though, is Trevor's name in Japan was actually Ralph. Not as cool if you ask me, I think Trevor's a lot better. I just wanted to mention that real quick, but anyway, on to the plot. The year is 1476, over 200 years before the events of the first game. For the first time, we see Dracula trying to take over the world with his goons and generally causing chaos. Humanity is trying to find their savior, and they find it with Trevor Belmont, a member of the fabled Belmont clan and ancestor to Simon Belmont. The Belmonts were initially banished from civilization due to their power. However, with Dracula roaming around, they had to call on them for help again. Trevor sets off from the town of Wallachia. Wait, isn't this supposed to be Wallachia? Hold on a second. Holy shit, yeah, it is. Wow, that is a really rough mistranslation. Anyway, Trevor sets off from the town of Wallachia to fulfill his duties by protecting the world from Dracula and his goons. Once again, basic? Yes. Does it really matter? Not to me. Plot really isn't too important with the early Castlevania games. That's what the later entries are for. I have to give them credit, though. They finally figured out how to explain the plot in-game. Leave the title screen running long enough and you'll get basically what I just said in a really simplified form. Thank God I no longer have to try and find scans of the manual translated to try and explain the plot. That was such a friggin' pain. Looking at this game from the jump, you'll see that we're back to that classic Castlevania gameplay. No towns to explore, no unhelpful villagers, no day-night cycle, just you plowing through Dracula's castle and killing anything that stands in your way, as God intended. Honestly, when it comes to the basics, there really isn't a lot to discuss. The game plays pretty much just like Castlevania 1. You have the vampire killer that can be upgraded a couple times along with all your sub-weapons returning from the first game. Unlike the first game though, I actually managed to get some use out of all of them. Yeah, even the dagger got some run of my playthroughs. Kinda nuts. They all act basically the same from what I can tell too, so you won't be encountering any weird changes. Notice how I said playthroughs, plural, just before. That's because there are multiple different pathways you can go down leading to new, unique levels. Compared to Castlevania 1, there are over double the levels here too, so there's a lot of variety. I'll go a bit more depth on those levels shortly, but I like a pretty good chunk of them. Going down these paths will also lead you to finding the other playable characters in this game. For the first time in the series, you can play as someone other than a Belmont. There are 3 characters here: Grant, Sypha, and Alucard. Grant is here because his family was killed by Dracula and is seeking revenge. I hate to be the guy to say it though, I don't think he's going to be getting it done with that dinky knife he wields. Seriously, I don't know how he hits anything with it. In the Japanese version, he doesn't have this as his main weapon, he just uses the dagger, which is better, but it's still just the dagger, it can only take you so far. Grant also climbs walls and ceilings, weirdly I might add. It's kind of strange how you control it, I don't like it too much. And he has fluid mid-air control. Wait, you're telling me this random guy can be controlled like any other platforming character, but all these other way more powerful human beings control as stiff as a board? They must be training their jumping skills for power. It's the only way this can make sense. I don't get it. Anyways, Sypha is a pretty awesome character. She can get her own magical spells, and they absolutely crush some enemies in boss fights. I think she's probably my favorite out of all of them. Alucard is alright, but he's a long way from his Symphony of the Night form. He still has an RA projectile as his main weapon, and can transform into a bat if you have the hearts to spare. I like this a lot, it makes me feel like I'm giving certain parts of the level a giant middle finger. Adding in these multiple different characters and pathways opens up the game to be really replayable. Before this review, I really never explored any of the new characters or the different stages, but now, I don't think I could play this game without using some of them. Speaking of the levels, my god, have they stepped up their game or what? These are the best looking stages on the NES, bar none. They're all so much more detailed and interesting compared to the other two games. Returning motifs like the castle levels, clock tower, and catacombs look so much more visually interesting and offer up new platforming challenges. Along with this, gone are the days of only exploring the castle. We got some brand new areas. Places like the Mad Forest, the Ghost Ship, the Sunken City, and the Cliffside all add a new dimension to the world of Castlevania. Some of the stages also got some pretty funky names too. The Clock Tower of Untimely Death, Haunted Ship of Fools, the Murky Marsh of Morbid Morons, wow that's a mouthful. They're all pretty funny, although I kinda wish they fully leaned into it for the whole game, because eventually we just go back to the basic names like Underground Catacombs or The Main Hall. Not all the stages are winners though. The Cliffside entrance level has these gimmicks where blocks either get destroyed by what I'm guessing is acid, and blocks that drop on top of you to get to higher places. This isn't really fun to me, it's just too much waiting around and watching stuff happen. Although this part of the stage can very easily kill you if you aren't careful, so you still have to be kind of aware of what's going on. I just use the Alucard to get past this part of the stage anyway, and it works. Usually. While we're talking about the presentation, how about that soundtrack, man? This blows the other two games out of the water, and this is coming from someone that loves both games' soundtracks. There are a ton of songs that just rock. The Stage 1 theme, Beginning, is another series staple, Mad Forest is super catchy, the Ghost Ship theme, Anxiety, is a really foreboding piece, and there's so many more I can mention. There's even a great remix of Vampire Killer later in this game, the first of many remixes of that song in this series. This is a great soundtrack, and once again, I highly recommend listening to it. However, if you are going to listen to it, I suggest the Japanese version. See, I told you the comparisons would come eventually. The Japanese version of this game had a special sound chip, the Konami VRC6 chip. It was created for better sound quality, and its creation was aided by Hidenori Maezawa, one of the composers of this game. Unfortunately, the Western versions of the NES couldn't support that, so versions of Dracula's Curse had their own different sound chip over here in the States, hence the regional differences. Anyway, the Japanese version's sound quality is way better if you ask me. Take a listen to some different songs and let me know what you think. Like I said, I think the Japanese version is better, but no matter which version of the soundtrack you listen to, it'll be worth it. So, we have a great return to form with the gameplay, new stages, new characters, and a killer soundtrack? This sounds like one of the best NES games of all time, right? Let me tell you why I don't like this game. In my review of Castlevania 1, I talked at length about how difficult it is. From the controls, to the level design, to the enemies you face, that game is very hard to finish, even as someone who has finished it multiple times. Now imagine everything I just said, applying to Castlevania 3, but given an inadvisable number of steroids. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is one of the hardest games I've ever played, and one of the hardest games on the NES. Like the first game, this is also considered one of the hardest games on the NES, but this one is universally considered more challenging, and it has definitely earned that distinction. What really sucks to me is that it starts out fine. It's still challenging, but pretty manageable if you ask me. Once you get to around stage 5 though, the game starts to get ridiculous. Let's go down the list of why this game is so hard. First, the control is exactly the same as before. Now normally, I can handle the stiff controls of a Belmont, but here it seems so much worse. It doesn't help that, like the past two games, you can only whip directly in front of you. It's something I hadn't brought up until now just because I hadn't really seen it as a debilitating issue, but now it's making me wish for multi-directional whipping all the time. The knockback is also here again, and not to draw out this point too long, it still sucks. Second, the enemies in this game are friggin' relentless. These guys are seriously out for blood in this game. Returning enemies like Medusa Heads, Flea Men, Axe Knights, and Bone Pillars are all a pain like their previous games. But the worst returner, if you ask me, are the Crows. They were a little annoying in the first game, but now they move way faster and come at even stranger angles. They are so hard to hit. The bosses are honestly a huge upgrade, and most of them are pretty fun fights. There are some, though, that can just fuck right off. These dragons on the causeway aren't too bad, but getting hit once will basically lead you to just falling in the water and dying. Death at the end of Stage 8 is also pretty tough. If you're lucky enough to have the holy water at this point, you can cheese it like the first game, but that's a bit tougher to do, so you're going to be in for a tough one anyway. The doppelganger in Stage 9 is also no fun to deal with if you aren't prepared, by the way. Next is the overall level design, and let me be more explicit here. I cannot stand the goddamn stairs in this game. It's really hard just to hit anything on the stairs, and your sub-weapons are just about useless. One of the interesting things about Dracula's Curse is that there are a lot more levels where you can climb up or down through vertically scrolling levels. It's pretty neat at first, but then you realize very early on how helpless you are on the stairs. There are certain levels like the Clock Tower and the aptly named Tower of Terror that are really hard just because of some of the stuff you face on the stairs, like Medusa Heads or these fucking demons that just move in a weird pattern. Seriously, what is this? The biggest offender to me, though, is Stage 9 and Stage 10. Both of these have vertical scrolling segments in them, and I swear, it is almost impossible to not take damage here. This wouldn't even be too bad, honestly, if it wasn't for, in my opinion, this game's biggest flaw. Now, if you got hit by something like a Medusa Head in Stage 1, it wouldn't do a whole lot of damage to you. Makes sense, it's a Medusa Head, right? In Stage 10, though, it does a whole quarter of your life meter. Like, what? Just because I'm deeper in the game means that enemies that barely hurt me before are now demolishing me? Seriously, everything in the late game does like a quarter of your health, and in certain crowded areas, you'll be getting massacred. This is why I say the Japanese version of Dracula's Curse is the superior version, because it doesn't have this stupid design flaw in it. An enemy will do the same amount of damage no matter what point of the game you're in. After I finished recording footage for my first ride on this game for the American version, I switched to the Japanese version because I couldn't take it any longer. Don't get me wrong, it's still really, really hard, but it at least is a little bit more manageable. Either way, I'm still abusing save states just to get through this game. I simply don't have the patience to do it without them. The closest I came to finishing it without save states was making it to Stage 9 on my original NES, but I just gave up. It was too difficult. I'm pretty sure I even used the help me code here too. This code gives you some extra lives for your journey, I think like 9 or 10, but those only go so far. If you're able to finish this game without save states or on original hardware, good for you. That's a neat accomplishment. I simply don't have the time to sit there and constantly die to the same shit though, so I'll keep using my save states. As always, the game ends with a fight with Dracula, and man, this fight is a marathon of pain and suffering. His first form isn't too bad, but I swear I have such a hard time timing when that massive pillar of fire is going to come up and hit me. As long as you don't get too close to Dracula, you should be fine though. The Japanese version of this phase is more annoying if you ask me. For some reason that larger pillar of fire lingers for longer, so hitting Dracula is harder and getting hit by Dracula is a lot easier. The second phase is this really freaky looking, I don't even know what's going on here. It's just this 5 heads that drool on you? What the fuck? Whatever. Anyway, to kill that, and now you see Dracula is supporting an all-new third form, which is this giant bird thing. God, were these designers on crack? Anyway, this is where you'll experience real doom and despair. These lasers that shoot out of his hands can be so hard to dodge because they're so large and they home in on you. In the Japanese version, they're much shorter and they don't home in on you, so I don't know what's going on here. Like, I thought the Japanese versions of games were supposed to be more difficult, but this game alone is challenging that stereotype. Everything I just named, though, isn't even the worst part of the whole ordeal. If you get a game over at any point during this final boss fight, you have to go all the way back to the start of the level. What? What? In the first game, if you got a game over against Dracula, you would start at the foot of that grand staircase right outside the boss arena. Why the sudden change? Was Mr. Akamatsu really that sore about what his bosses did to him and he decided to take it out on the players? There's zero good reason to do this other than to kick the player in the nuts one more time before they finish the game. Whatever. Once you do finally beat Dracula, you watch the castle crumble by yourself or with whoever your chosen partner for the game was. Gran is happy Dracula's gone and goes to help rebuild his home. Alucard stands on the cliffside pondering the fact that he just killed his father, and Sypha reveals herself to be a woman, and her and Trevor go off together. I didn't mention this earlier, but when you first recruit Sypha, she is referred to as he to keep her gender a mystery. Basically, they did the same thing Nintendo did when hiding Samus's gender in the original Metroid, and I think that's a pretty neat detail. I'm very conflicted with this game. Certain aspects of it, like its lack of change with the controls, tough as nails enemies, and really its difficulty as a whole, irritate the hell out of me. Even with all that though, I can't deny all the other great things it added. The multiple characters and pathways, the huge upgrade in visuals, the bangin' soundtrack. I truly don't know how to feel about this game. It's weird because this game is considered by many to be better than Castlevania 1, and I can see it. I can see why someone would say that. But I simply can't bring myself to do it. I'm so serious, if this game was just a little bit easier, or honestly if we just got the Japanese version over here instead, I'd think I'd fall into the same camp as most and say it's better than the first game. For now though, it takes the silver medal when ranking the NES trilogy. But how do I feel about the game on its own, without looking towards the series as a whole? In that context, I still think this is a must-play for the console. I would fully recommend someone to play this game. Just be sure you're mentally prepared for how tough the game is, and be sure you got those save states or rewind features on standby. You're probably gonna need it.